Captain Jake Morrison stared at the warning lights flashing across his control panel as the UES horizon shook violently around him. The ship's engines were failing, and they needed to land somewhere safe right now or everyone on board would die in the cold darkness of space. "Kate, how long do we have before the engines give out completely?" Morrison called to his chief engineer, who was working frantically at her station. Kate Williams looked up from her console with sweat beading on her forehead. "Maybe 10 minutes if we're lucky, Captain. The plasma conduits are overloading and I can't stop the cascade failure from here." Morrison turned to his navigator. "Alex, what's the closest place we can set down?" Security Chief Alex Turner was already scanning the nearby star system on his sensors. "There's a planet about 4 minutes away at maximum burn, Captain. It's got atmosphere and solid ground, but..." He paused and frowned at his readings. "But what, Alex?" "Sir, there's already someone there. Multiple ships in orbit and what looks like research stations on the surface. The energy signatures don't match any human technology." Dr. Lisa Bennett looked up from her science station, where she had been monitoring the alien signals. "Captain, I'm picking up archaeological scanning patterns. Someone is conducting extensive excavation work down there. This could be a protected site." Morrison felt the ship shake again as another system failed. The choice was simple but terrible. They could try to make it to another planet and probably die when their engines exploded. Or they could land on this world and deal with whatever aliens they found there. At least his crew would be alive to face the consequences. "We're going down," Morrison decided. "Kate, give me everything the engines have left. Alex, find us a landing spot away from the alien operations. Lisa, start broadcasting on all frequencies that we're having an emergency and need to make an immediate landing." The next few minutes passed in a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. Kate coaxed every last bit of power from the dying engines while Alex guided them toward what looked like an empty valley, several kilometers from the main alien dig sites. Lisa transmitted their emergency signals, hoping the aliens would understand that humans were in trouble and not looking for a fight. The horizon touched down hard in a cloud of dust and debris. The ship's hull groaned as it settled, but they were alive and on solid ground. Morrison felt relief wash over him until he looked at Alex's face. "Captain, we have a problem. The landing site I picked?" Alex's voice was tight with worry. "The sensors are showing massive structural damage to something underground. Something that was there before we landed." Dr. Bennett was already pulling up geological scans of the area. "Oh no," she whispered as the data appeared on her screen. "Captain, there was a structure here. A large one made of some kind of crystalline material. Our landing thrusters and the impact of the ship." She stopped and looked up at Morrison with fear in her eyes. "What is it, Lisa?" "Sir, I think we just destroyed an alien monument." Before Morrison could respond, the communications console lit up with incoming signals. The translator system struggled to make sense of the alien language, but gradually words began forming on the screen. "Unknown vessel, identify yourselves immediately. You have violated sacred ground and destroyed property of the Zephyrian Republic. Prepare to be boarded for inspection and judgment." Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Sam Rodriguez, his diplomatic officer, had just arrived and was reading the alien message with growing concern. "Captain," Sam said quietly, "if we just destroyed something sacred to these aliens, this could become a major diplomatic incident. Earth's membership in the Galactic Council is still probationary. Something like this could get humanity kicked out of interstellar civilization entirely." Through the main view screen, Morrison could see alien ships descending from orbit. They were beautiful crystalline vessels that seemed to be grown rather than built, with surfaces that caught and reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. But their weapon systems were clearly visible and powered up. The lead alien ship landed nearby and a ramp extended from its side. Several tall figures emerged wearing what looked like environmental suits made of the same crystal material as their ships. They moved with purpose toward the horizon. "Sir," Alex reported, "I'm detecting 3 other alien species in the area. Ship signatures match the Vrex Collective, the Thackeran Empire, and something called the Umbral Syndicate. Word about this incident is spreading fast." Morrison stood up and straightened his uniform. "Sam, you're with me. Kate and Alex maintain emergency systems but don't power weapons under any circumstances. Lisa, I need you to figure out exactly what we destroyed and how important it was to these aliens." "Captain, what are you planning to do?" Sam asked as they headed for the airlock. "I'm going to do what my grandfather taught me when I was a kid, Sam. When you break something that belongs to someone else, you face them directly. and take responsibility for what you did. The airlock cycled open and Morrison stepped out onto the alien world with Sam close behind. The air was thin but breathable and the gravity was slightly lighter than Earth normal. In front of them stood the alien delegation led by a figure that was clearly their commander. The Zephyrian was tall and graceful with skin that looked like living crystal that shifted colors as he moved. His eyes were multifaceted like diamonds, and when he spoke, his voice had a musical quality that the universal translator rendered into crisp, precise English. "I am Commander Kethril of the Zephyrian Republic Archaeological Survey. You are Captain Morrison of the human vessel that has just committed an act of desecration against my people. The monument you destroyed contained the names and histories of 10 billion Zephyrian citizens who died defending our worlds against an ancient enemy. It was irreplaceable and sacred." Morrison felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. 10 billion names. 10 billion lives remembered in stone that his ship had just turned to dust and rubble. He looked into Kethril alien eyes and saw something he recognized despite their different species. He saw grief and rage and loss that cut deeper than any physical wound. "Commander Kethril," Morrison said, stepping forward. "My name is Jake Morrison, and I am completely responsible for what happened here. We had an engine failure and needed to make an emergency landing or my crew would have died. But that doesn't excuse the damage we caused or lessen the loss you've suffered because of our presence." The alien commander's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. Behind him, Morrison could see other aliens from different species watching the encounter with obvious interest. This moment was being observed and judged by representatives of multiple galactic civilizations. Morrison continued speaking from his heart, rather than from any diplomatic training. "I don't know your customs or your beliefs, Commander, but I know what it means to lose people you care about and to have their memory threatened. If you'll allow it, I would like to understand what we destroyed and find a way to make amends for the harm we've caused." Commander Kethril studied Morrison with his diamond-like eyes for several long moments before speaking. The other alien observers moved closer but maintained a respectful distance as if sensing this conversation would determine much more than just the fate of one human ship. "You speak of making amends, Captain Morrison, but you do not understand what you have destroyed," Kethril said with that musical voice that somehow conveyed both sadness and anger. The monument of eternal memory was not simply carved stone. It was grown over 3,000 years by my people using our most sacred crystal song techniques. Every name, every story, every life lost in the Great Devouring was preserved within its structure. Morrison felt his stomach drop as the true scope of their accident became clear. "The Great Devouring?" he asked quietly. 12,000 years ago, a species known as the Devourers swept across this sector of the galaxy, consuming entire worlds and all life upon them, Kethril explained. "They were not merely conquerors, Captain. They literally consumed the biological and energy essence of every living thing they encountered, leaving behind dead husks of planets with no atmosphere, no water, no possibility of life ever returning." Dr. Bennett had joined Morrison and Sam outside the ship and was recording everything with her scientific instruments. She spoke up hesitantly. "Commander, if I may ask, what happened to these Devourers? Did your people defeat them?" Kethril turned his attention to the human scientist. "They vanished as suddenly as they appeared, Doctor. One day they were destroying our colonies and the next they were simply gone. We never learned why or where they went. What remained was the largest loss of life in recorded galactic history. Over 200 billion beings from dozens of species died during their rampage." Morrison could see other aliens gathering at a distance, including the representatives from the Vrex Collective, who looked like tall insectoid beings with multiple arms and large compound eyes. The Thakran Empire delegates were clearly warriors with heavy armor and weapons that seemed built into their bodies. The mysterious Umbral Syndicate members stayed in the shadows, but Morrison could feel their attention focused intently on this conversation. "My family line was completely eliminated during the Great Devouring," Kethril continued, and Morrison heard personal pain beneath the formal words. "My ancestors, my bloodline, my genetic legacy, all consumed by those creatures. The only thing that remained was their names preserved in the monument of eternal memory, along with the stories of their lives and their sacrifice in defending our worlds." Sam Rodriguez stepped forward, using his diplomatic training to try to find some path through this crisis. "Commander Kethril on behalf of Earth and humanity, I want to express our deepest regret for this accident. We had no knowledge of the significance of this site, and if there had been any other option, we would never have landed here. Your regret changes nothing, came a new voice as one of the Thakkaran warriors approached. I am War Commander Brutax of the 7th Legion. Humans have once again proven they are too primitive and destructive to participate in galactic civilization. This incident should result in immediate expulsion from the Council. Morrison turned to face the Thakkaran and felt old anger rising in his chest. He had studied the files on first contact between humans and the Thakkaran Empire. The war that followed had cost millions of lives on both sides, including his own great-grandfather, who died defending a colony world from Thakkaran raiders. But he pushed down the anger and spoke calmly. War Commander Brutax, I understand your people have reasons to distrust humanity, but this was an accident, not an act of aggression. We're here to find a solution, not to make the situation worse. Solutions, one of the Vrex Collective observers said as it approached on its multiple legs. The Vrex Collective has calculated 17 different resolution protocols for this situation. None of them result in adequate compensation for the destroyed cultural artifact. The probability of successful diplomatic resolution is currently 8.3%. Dr. Bennett was studying her readings of the destroyed monument site and suddenly looked up with excitement. Captain, I'm detecting massive data storage within the crystal fragments. The information might not be completely lost. If we could recover and reconstruct the data patterns? Impossible, Kethralva said firmly. The crystal matrices are too damaged, and the song patterns that created them are known only to our most ancient memory keepers. Even if some data survived, the reconstruction would take centuries, and require knowledge that few of my people still possess. Morrison was about to respond when his communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. He looked at Sam, who nodded, understanding that this would be orders from the diplomatic corps back home. Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Johnson from Fleet Command. We've received reports of your situation from monitoring stations in the sector. You are ordered to offer standard reparations to the affected alien government and depart the system immediately. Earth cannot afford a diplomatic incident that might threaten our council membership. Handle this quickly and efficiently. Morrison looked at the alien faces surrounding him, the Zephyrian commander who had lost his entire family heritage, the Thakkaran warrior who saw this as proof of human unworthiness, the logical Virex who calculated their chances of success at less than 10%, the mysterious Umbral Syndicate representatives who watched everything but said nothing. Understood, Admiral. Morrison replied into his communicator, then closed the channel. Sam looked at him with concern. Captain, those are direct orders from Fleet Command. We need to follow diplomatic protocol and offer monetary compensation for the damages. Morrison was quiet for a moment, thinking about his great-grandfather, his letters from the war letters that talked about doing what was right even when it was hard, even when following orders would be easier. He thought about the 10 billion names that were now scattered dust in an alien wind. Sam, Morrison said finally, monetary compensation isn't going to bring back 10 billion names or heal the loss of an entire family line. Earth's diplomatic corps doesn't understand what we're really dealing with here. Captain, what are you saying? Sam asked, though Morrison could see in his friend's eyes that he already knew. Morrison turned back to Commander Kethralva and the assembled alien observers. Commander, I'd like to make a request. Before we discuss reparations or diplomatic solutions, I want to understand exactly what was lost when our ship destroyed your monument. I want to know about the people whose names were carved in that stone and the stories that were preserved there. Would you be willing to tell me about them? The reaction from the aliens was immediate and confused. The Vrex Collective members buzzed among themselves in rapid calculations. The Thakkaran warrior looked baffled by this departure from expected diplomatic protocol. Even the shadowy Umbral Syndicate representatives seemed to shift with interest. But it was Kethralva's reaction that mattered most. The crystalline commander stood perfectly, still for several heartbeats, and then spoke in a voice filled with something Morrison couldn't quite identify. In all the centuries since the Great Devouring, no alien species has ever asked to hear the stories of our dead Captain Morrison. Why would you want to know about people who lived and died thousands of years before your species even reached the stars? Morrison looked directly into Kethralva's multifaceted eyes and spoke from his heart. Because, Commander, those people mattered to you and your species, and our actions erased their memory. If I'm going to take responsibility for what we destroyed, then I need to understand what it really meant. The silence that followed was so complete that Morrison could hear the wind blowing across the alien landscape. The various alien observers seemed frozen in place as if his words had stopped time itself. Even the mechanical sounds from the nearby ship seemed muted. Kethril Va's crystalline skin shifted through several color patterns that Morrison was beginning to recognize as emotional responses. Finally, the Zephyrian commander spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "You truly wish to know about the dead Captain Morrison?" "Yes, sir, I do." What happened next surprised everyone present. Kethril Va began to sing in a hauntingly beautiful voice that resonated through the crystal formations around them. The song had no words that the universal translators could render, but somehow Morrison understood that it was a song of mourning and memory. When the song ended, Kethril Va looked at Morrison with something that might have been respect. "Very well, Captain. I will tell you about my people's greatest loss, but first you must understand what the Devourers took from us." The Zephyrian commander gestured toward the ruins of the monument and began to speak. "The Great Devouring began on a world called Zephyr Prime, where my ancestors lived in crystal cities that sang with the voices of millions. They were artists and philosophers and memory keepers who had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of preserving knowledge in living crystal." Dr. Bennett was recording everything, while taking readings of the crystal fragments scattered around the landing site. Kate Williams had joined them from the ship along with Alex Turner, who was keeping watch on the various alien ships in the area. The first sign of the Devourers was when the outer colony worlds went silent. Kethril Va continued. No distress calls, no emergency beacons, just silence where there had been thriving civilizations. When our exploration ships reached those worlds, they found nothing but dead rock stripped of all atmosphere and water. Morrison found himself genuinely interested in the story, not just as a diplomatic necessity, but because the loss and pain in Kethril Va's voice reminded him of his own family's military traditions and the stories of sacrifice that had been passed down through generations. "My ancestor Kethril Mian was a memory keeper on Zephyr Prime," the commander said, and his voice took on a more personal tone. "When the Devourers finally reached our home world, he and millions of others worked desperately to preserve as much of our history and culture as possible before the end came." One of the Vrex collective observers approached cautiously. "Commander Kethril Va, this historical recitation serves no logical purpose in resolving the current diplomatic crisis. The probability of successful negotiation decreases with each moment spent on irrelevant storytelling." Morrison turned to face the insectoid alien. "With respect to the Vrex collective, this isn't irrelevant. If we're going to find a real solution to this problem, then understanding what was lost is essential." The Vrex observer tilted its head, and what Morrison was learning was a sign of confusion among their species. "Captain Morrison, your approach to problem-solving appears highly inefficient. Standard diplomatic protocol calls for immediate assessment of damages, followed by negotiation of appropriate compensation. Sometimes the standard approach isn't enough," Morrison replied. "Commander Kethril Va, please continue." The Thackeran War Commander Brutax moved closer, clearly annoyed by the delay. "This weakness disgusts me. Humans show their true nature by wallowing in sentiment instead of facing consequences with honor. Your people should accept judgment and punishment like warriors, not waste time with useless emotional displays." Morrison felt anger flare again at the Thackeran's words, but before he could respond, Kethril Va spoke up. "War Commander Brutax, the human captain, shows more honor in seeking to understand our loss than your entire empire showed during your unprovoked attack on their colony worlds 50 years ago." The tension between the alien species was becoming obvious, and Morrison realized that this incident was about much more than just the destroyed monument. Old conflicts and prejudices were surfacing, and the way he handled this situation could affect relationships between multiple civilizations. Dr. Bennett looked up from her readings with excitement. "Captain, I'm detecting something unusual in these crystal fragments. The data storage patterns are more complex than anything I've ever seen. It's like each piece contains not just information but actual memory engrams. If Commander Kethril Va's people have perfect crystalline memory, then these fragments might still contain recoverable data." Kethril Va's attention snapped to the human scientist. "What did you just say about crystalline memory, Doctor?" "Well, sir, from my readings, it appears that your people don't just store information in crystal matrices. You actually transfer consciousness and memory patterns into them. The monument wasn't just a database, it was literally a repository of living memories from your ancestors." That is correct, Dr. Bennett. We Zephyrians never truly forget anything we experience, and our monuments allow us to share those memories across generations. The Monument of Eternal Memory contained not just names but the actual last thoughts and experiences of those who died in the Great Devouring. Morrison was beginning to understand the true magnitude of what they had destroyed. Commander, you're saying that monument contained the actual memories of 10 billion people who died? Yes, Captain Morrison. When my ancestor Kethril Meehan died defending Zephyr Prime, his final memories of home and family and hope were preserved in crystal, along with those of every other victim. For 12,000 years we have been able to visit that monument and experience their memories as if we were there ourselves. The weight of that revelation settled on Morrison's shoulders like a physical burden. They hadn't just destroyed a memorial, they had erased the last living connection between the Zephyrian people and their lost ancestors. Kate Williams spoke up from where she was examining the ship's damage. Captain, if the Zephyrian memory system works the way Dr. Bennett described then, maybe we can help recover some of the data. Our quantum computers might be able to interface with their crystal technology. The human engineer suggests an interesting possibility, came a new voice from the shadows. One of the Umbral Syndicate representatives finally stepped forward, revealing a figure in dark robes whose face remained hidden. The Syndicate has observed crystal memory technology before. Recovery may be possible, but it would require unprecedented cooperation between species. Morrison looked around at the gathered aliens, seeing opportunity where moments before there had been only crisis. Commander Kethril Va, would you be willing to work with my crew to try to recover what we can from the monument fragments? I know it won't restore everything that was lost, but it might preserve some of the memories that were stored there. Kethril Va stood silent for long moments, while the colors in his crystalline skin shifted. Through patterns Morrison was learning to read as deep thought. Finally, the Zephyrian commander spoke. Captain Morrison, your offer is unprecedented, but I must ask why you would make such an effort when your own government has ordered you to simply pay compensation and leave. What do you gain from helping us recover our lost memories? Morrison thought about his great-grandfather's letters about doing what was right, regardless of the cost. He thought about the 10 billion names scattered in the dust around their landing site. Most importantly, he thought about the pain he had seen in Kethril Va's voice when describing his lost family. Commander, I don't gain anything from this except maybe the chance to help heal a wound that my ship caused. Sometimes that's reason enough. The next several hours transformed the landing site from a place of destruction into something that looked more like a collaborative research station. Morrison watched with amazement as his crew worked alongside Zephyrian technicians and even some of the alien observers who had initially seemed hostile to their presence. Dr. Bennett had set up a field laboratory where she worked with Zephyrian memory keepers to analyze the crystal fragments. Kate Williams was deep in technical discussions with Zephyrian engineers about quantum resonance patterns that could restore damaged memory matrices. Even Alex Turner was helping coordinate the security arrangements that allowed multiple alien species to work in the same area without conflict. What surprised Morrison most was how quickly barriers between species began breaking down once they started working toward a common goal. He watched Kate Williams teaching a young Zephyrian engineer about human quantum computing techniques, while the alien showed her how crystal song could be used to repair damaged data storage. Captain Morrison called one of the Vrex collective observers as it approached on its multiple legs. I am Primary Calculator Jex9. The collective has been observing your crew's interactions with the Zephyrian workers, and we have reached some unexpected conclusions. Morrison looked up from where he was helping sort crystal fragments according to their memory density patterns that Dr. Bennett had taught him to recognize. What kind of conclusions, Primary Calculator? Our models predicted that this crisis would result in diplomatic failure and possible military conflict between species. However, your approach has created variables that our logical systems did not account for. The efficiency of interspecies cooperation has increased by 47% since you began this recovery effort. Morrison smiled at the insectoid alien. Sometimes, Primary Calculator, the best solution isn't the most logical one. Sometimes you have to follow your heart instead of your head. Hearts are biological organs that pump circulatory fluid, Captain Morrison. They cannot provide strategic guidance or problem-solving capabilities. Dr. Bennett looked up from her work with a grin. He means emotions, Primary Calculator. Humans often make decisions based on feelings like empathy or compassion, rather than pure logic. This concept requires further study. Shex9 replied, but Morrison noticed that the Vrex observer began paying closer attention to how the human crew interacted with the other species. The real breakthrough came when Commander Kethril Va approached Morrison with something that looked like excitement in his crystalline features. "Captain, we have recovered a significant portion of the memory data from the monument fragments. Your Dr. Bennett's techniques combined with our crystal song restoration methods have preserved far more than we initially hoped possible." Morrison felt genuine relief wash over him. "That's wonderful news, Commander. How much were you able to save?" "Nearly 60% of the stored memories are intact or can be reconstructed," Kethril Va replied. "But Captain, there is something else you need to know. While working to restore my ancestors' memories, we discovered something unexpected about the final days of the Great Devouring." Before Kethril Va could explain further, War Commander Brutax approached. With several other Thakkaran warriors behind him, Morrison could see that the reptilian alien was agitated about something. "Captain Morrison, I have received new orders from the Thakkaran High Command. Your actions here have been reported to the Galactic Council, and there is considerable debate about human methods of crisis resolution. Some council members are demanding immediate judgment, while others are requesting detailed reports on your unconventional approach." Morrison looked around at the worksite where humans and aliens were collaborating in ways that had never happened before. "War Commander, what exactly are the Thakkaran High Command's concerns? Your refusal to follow standard diplomatic protocols has created uncertainty about human reliability in galactic affairs." Brutax replied, but Morrison noticed something different in the warrior's tone. "However, I must admit that your crew's actions have produced results that traditional methods might not have achieved." That admission seemed to cost the Thakkaran warrior considerable effort, and Morrison realized that even the militaristic aliens were beginning to question their assumptions about human behavior. Dr. Bennett suddenly called out with excitement, "Captain Commander Kethril Va, you need to see this. I've been analyzing the recovered memories, and I found something incredible. In the final recordings from the Great Devouring," everyone gathered around Dr. Bennett's field laboratory where she had connected human quantum computers to Zephyrian crystal memory systems. The hybrid technology was displaying holographic images of the last days of Zephyr Prime 12,000 years ago. "Watch this memory sequence," Dr. Bennett said as she activated the display. "This is from Kethril Mian. Just before the Devourers reached the capital city, the hologram showed a beautiful crystalline city under attack by creatures that looked like living shadows consuming everything they touched. But in the final moment, something unexpected happened. The Devourer forces suddenly stopped their attack and began retreating toward their ships. "They're leaving," Kethril Va whispered as he watched his ancestors' memories. But why would they stop when victory was so close? Dr. Bennett enhanced the audio from the memory recording, and suddenly they could hear voices speaking in an unknown language. The universal translator struggled for several moments before finally producing text. "We cannot continue this path. The consumption brings no satisfaction, only emptiness. We have become the very thing we once fought against. No more worlds will die by our choice." The silence that followed was complete. Morrison stared at the holographic display, trying to process what they had just learned. The Devourers hadn't been defeated in battle or driven away by military force. They had stopped themselves. "The Devourers chose to end their rampage," Kethril Va said in a voice filled with wonder. "After destroying so many worlds, they simply decided to stop." One of the shadowy Umbral Syndicate representatives stepped forward, and for the first time removed the hood of his dark robe. Beneath was a face that looked almost human, but with features that seemed to shift and change in the light. "Commander Kethril Va, the reason the Devourers stopped their conquest is standing before you," the figure said in a voice that carried centuries of sadness. "We are their descendants, Captain Morrison. The Umbral Syndicate is what remained of the Devourer species after they realized the horror of what they had become." Morrison felt the ground shift beneath his feet as he realized the implications. "You're saying that your people were the ones who caused the Great Devouring?" "Our ancestors were consumed by hunger that could never be satisfied," the Umbral representative replied. "They devoured entire worlds seeking something they could never find. When they finally understood that their path led only to universal death, they chose exile and transformation rather than continue their destruction." War Commander Brutak stepped back instinctively, reaching for his weapons, but Morrison held up a hand. "Commander," Morrison said to the Umbral representative, "why are you revealing this now?" "Because, Captain Morrison, for 12,000 years we have searched for a way to make amends for the crimes of our ancestors. We have watched countless species attempt to resolve conflicts through force or logic or diplomacy, but always the cycle of violence continues. Today, however, we witness something different." The Umbral representative gestured toward the worksite where humans and aliens continued collaborating. "On the memory restoration project, we saw a species that responds to causing harm not with excuses or minimal compensation, but with genuine desire to understand and heal the damage they caused. We saw humans choose empathy over efficiency and cooperation over conquest. For the first time in 12 millennia, we have hoped that true healing might be possible." Morrison looked around at the faces, both human and alien, that surrounded him. In trying to repair one accident, they had apparently opened the door to healing wounds that had festered for thousands of years. "What are you asking of us?" Morrison said quietly. "Captain Morrison, we wish to know if the human approach to making amends could help us atone for the greatest crime in galactic history." Morrison stared at the Umbral representative for several long moments as the weight of the request settled on his shoulders. Around him, he could see the other aliens processing this revelation in their own ways. The Vrex collective members were buzzing among themselves in rapid calculations, while War Commander Brutax looked like he was ready to call for military backup. "You're asking me to help you make amends for the deaths of 200 billion people across dozens of worlds," Morrison said slowly. "I'm just a starship captain, not a miracle worker." "Captain Morrison," the Umbral representative replied, "you have accomplished something in the past few hours that we believed impossible. You turned a diplomatic crisis into genuine cooperation between species that have been enemies for decades. You showed us that healing is possible even when the damage seems irreparable." Dr. Bennett looked up from the memory restoration equipment, where she had been working with the Zephyrian technicians. "Captain, the memory recovery project is nearly complete. We've managed to restore almost 80% of the stored data from the monument. But more importantly, we've created something new." Morrison walked over to where his science officer was working alongside Commander Kethril Va. "What do you mean, Lisa?" "Sir, the restoration process required us to combine human quantum computing with Zephyrian crystal song technology and Vrex logical algorithms. We've accidentally created a completely new form of memory storage that's more powerful than anything any of our species had developed alone." Kate Williams joined them from where she had been discussing engineering concepts with aliens from 3 different civilizations. "Captain, it gets better than that. The collaborative techniques we've developed here could revolutionize how species work together on large projects. We've proven that our different approaches to problem solving actually complement each other perfectly." Morrison looked around the worksite and realized that something extraordinary had happened without anyone planning it. The accident that had brought them here in crisis had somehow become the foundation for the kind of interspecies cooperation that had never existed before in galactic history. Commander Kethril Va approached with what Morrison now recognized as deep emotional satisfaction in his crystalline features. "Captain Morrison, the restored memories of my ancestors are more complete than we dared hope. But beyond that, your people have helped us understand something we never realized about the Great Devouring." "What's that, Commander?" "The Devourers who attacked our worlds were not acting from malice but from a hunger they could not control or understand. Your Dr. Bennett's analysis of the final memory sequences shows that they were as much victims of their nature as we were victims of their attacks. This knowledge changes how we view that ancient tragedy." Primary calculator. Jex 9 of the Vrex Collective approached with several of its fellow observers. "Captain Morrison, the Collective has completed its analysis of the events here today. Your methods have produced outcomes that exceed optimal logical solutions by factors we cannot adequately calculate. We must revise our understanding of effective problem resolution." "What are you saying?" Primary calculator. "We are saying, Captain, that emotion and empathy may be forms of intelligence that our purely logical systems have failed to recognize. The Vrex Collective wishes to study human decision-making processes in greater detail." War Commander Brutax stepped forward, but instead of the hostility Morrison expected, the Thackeran warrior seemed almost hesitant. "Captain Morrison, I have been in communication with the High Command throughout this incident. Initially, they ordered me to document human failures for presentation to the Galactic Council. Morrison tensed, expecting the worst, but Brutax continued in a different tone. However, the High Command has been monitoring the unprecedented cooperation occurring at this site. They have decided that perhaps human methods deserve further investigation, rather than immediate condemnation. Before Morrison could respond, his communicator chimed with another message from Earth. This time, however, the signal was coming from a much higher authority than Admiral Johnson. "Captain Morrison, this is President Chen calling from Earth. Reports of your situation have reached the highest levels of government and the Galactic Council. You are to continue your current course of action and provide detailed reports on all interspecies cooperation techniques you develop. Consider this a new mission priority." Morrison closed the communication channel and looked around at the faces, both human and alien, that surrounded him. "It seems like everyone wants to know how we accidentally created the most successful diplomatic mission in galactic history." The Umbral representative stepped closer, removing his hood completely to reveal features that shifted between different species. Characteristics as if his people had somehow absorbed aspects of every race they had encountered. "Captain Morrison, we have waited 12,000 years for an opportunity like this. Will you help us find a way to make amends for our ancestors' crimes?" Morrison thought about everything that had happened since their emergency landing. They had destroyed something irreplaceable, but in trying to truly understand and repair that damage, they had created something new and better. Maybe the same approach could work for healing wounds that went back millennia. "I don't know if what we've learned here can solve a problem that big," Morrison said honestly. "But I'm willing to try if you are." Dr. Bennett activated the restored memory crystal that now contained not just the original Zephyrian memories, but new recordings of the cooperation between species that had occurred during the restoration process. "Captain, I have an idea for how we could start." She gestured toward the hybrid technology that surrounded them. "What if we created a new kind of memorial here, not just for the victims of the Great Devouring, but for all the species that have suffered from conflicts throughout galactic history? A place where memories of loss could be preserved alongside memories of healing and cooperation." Commander Kethril Va's crystalline skin shifted through patterns of color that Morrison now understood represented deep emotion. "Dr. Bennett, are you suggesting that we build a monument to both the dead and the living?" "Exactly, Commander. A memorial that doesn't just preserve the past but actively works to prevent similar tragedies in the future. A place where different species can come to learn from each other and find new ways to resolve conflicts." Morrison looked at the gathered representatives of multiple civilizations and saw something he had never expected to see: hope. Real, genuine hope that the cycle of violence and mistrust that had defined galactic politics for millennia might finally be broken. Commander Kethril Va, Primary Calculator, Jex 9, War Commander Brutax, Morrison said, addressing each alien leader in turn. "Would your people be willing to work together to build something like that?" The response was immediate and unanimous. Every alien representative present agreed to support the project. 6 months later, Morrison stood in the same valley, but now it looked completely different. Where the UES Horizon had crash-landed, there was now a beautiful structure that combined architectural elements from dozens of species. The Memorial of Eternal Hope rose toward the sky in graceful spirals of living crystal quantum matrices and harmonic metal that sang with the voices of every species in the galaxy. Inside the memorial, the restored memories of the Great Devouring were preserved alongside new recordings of cooperation and healing. Visitors from across the galaxy came to learn about the past and to contribute their own experiences of conflict resolution and species cooperation. Morrison received regular reports about the impact the memorial was having on galactic politics. Border disputes that had lasted centuries were being resolved through collaborative teams trained in the techniques developed during the Memory Restoration Project. The Umbral Syndicate had emerged from the shadows to work openly on healing the damage their ancestors had caused. Most importantly, the Galactic Council had established the Human Initiative for Diplomatic Innovation to study and spread the approaches that had turned a diplomatic crisis into the foundation for a new era of interspecies cooperation. As Morrison prepared to leave the memorial and return to his duties as captain of the newly repaired UES Horizon, he reflected on how a simple emergency landing had changed everything. They had learned that sometimes the best way to fix something broken was not to restore it to what it was before, but to build something completely new and better from the pieces. The apology that had begun this transformation was now broadcast continuously from the memorial in hundreds of languages and directed toward every corner of the galaxy. It was a simple message that had somehow changed how entire civilizations thought about responsibility, accountability, and the possibility of healing. We will not let you be forgotten, and we will learn from our mistakes to build a better future for all species.